Have you ever outgrown a version of yourself, but then felt kind of guilty for it? Like you're supposed to stay the same person that you've always been because it makes other people comfortable. Maybe you're the fun friend who's suddenly craving quiet, or the overachiever who's realizing that success at all costs isn't actually success. Or the person who spent years in a relationship, but something inside you is whispering, "You're changing." I remember the exact moment that I realized I had to let go of the life I thought I wanted. I was sitting across from a guy who, on paper, checked every box. He said all the right things, he made me laugh, he even shared my love for deep conversations, but something just felt off, and not with him, with me. The version of me that would have clung to this, tried to make it work, twisted myself to fit, just wasn't there anymore. I had done too much work, seen too much of myself to pretend that I didn't feel the shift. And yet I still sat there, trying to talk myself back into my old ways. Maybe I'm being too picky. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe this discomfort is just fear. But it wasn't fear. It was growth. And I almost didn't let myself have it. And if I'm honest, this isn't just about relationships. It's about love itself. Because most of us were never taught how to love in a way that allows room for growth. We were taught to hold on, to fix, to compromise until we lose ourselves. And we mistake that for love. But real love, whether it's romantic, platonic, or even self-love, it requires evolution. It asks us to stop clinging to what was and start creating something new. It asks us to let go of attachment and control and old expectations so that we can build relationships that actually support the people that we're becoming. And that's exactly what today's guest is here to help us do. You might recognize his name, Young Pueblo. I've been a fan of his for quite a while. His true name is Diego Perez, and he's a meditator and a #1 New York Times bestselling author who's widely known by his pen name, Young Pueblo. He's sold over 1.5 million books worldwide that have been translated into over 25 languages. Online, he has an audience of over 4 million people. His writing focuses on the power of self-healing, creating healthy relationships, and the wisdom that comes when we truly work on knowing ourselves. His new book, How to Love Better, is available for pre-order and will be released March 2025. So in this episode, you will learn the subtle difference between love and attachment and why most people get it wrong. How to allow your relationships to evolve instead of holding on to old dynamics. And the key to loving others without losing yourself. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You guys, workplace stress is killing us. 61% of people are dealing with stress levels that are way beyond normal. So if you're feeling it, you are not alone. I used to think I could just push through everything, work harder, sleep less, pretend I had it all figured out. But that approach nearly broke me. I am all about following your joy. If that voice in your head is telling you to make a change, listen to it. Maybe you are ready to quit your job. Maybe you do need to flip your whole life upside down. But either way, you need support and tools to navigate it well. And that's where therapy comes in. Modern therapy teaches you how to set boundaries without feeling guilty, how to manage anxiety before it spirals, how to make big moves from a place of strength instead of desperation. And BetterHelp has over 30,000 therapists and has helped 5 million people worldwide. And you can talk to someone from your couch. No waiting rooms, no awkward scheduling. Therapy gives you the clarity on whether that voice telling you to make a change is your intuition or just the Sunday scaries. But either way, you deserve support. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. Let me ask you something. How much time did you spend last week thinking about what to eat? Planning meals, making grocery lists, wandering around the store like a lost tourist. I used to waste entire Sunday afternoons on this, and it was exhausting. Then I found Hungry Root. Hungry Root fills your cart with personalized picks and plans your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. They have over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, and most are ready in 15 minutes or less. I'm actually headed to Michigan this week, and I had my Hungry Root order delivered there. So I already know that I have meals ready and plenty of snacks for the kids without scrambling to find a grocery store. It's just handled. And what I love most is their smart cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements just for me. So no more buying spinach that rots in my fridge. They screen out over 200 additives and only source high quality ingredients. The time I've gotten back has just been life-changing. So take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE.
The primary thing that inspires other people is seeing the change that's happening within you. So you can like tell them, you got to go to this thing, you got to try this thing. That's not going to work as well as them seeing you make different choices, seeing you be calmer, seeing you be happier. They're going to be like, hey, what's up? What's going on with you? You know, if you did something to help yourself, I want to do that for myself too. The other end of that is that we have to understand as individuals that the conditioning of our minds creates a very unique shape. So the conditioning that I have is very different from the conditioning that my wife has. Same thing between you and your partner. And you'll find that people just don't grow at the same speeds, right? And what they're growing and working on can be wildly different.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
So let's start from the beginning, or at least the beginning of this area of focus for you, because I know you've been teaching the world amazing shit for a long time. So what made you realize that teaching people about love would become part of your life story?
It's really interesting. I've been honestly just pretty shocked with how much personal transformation had a direct impact on all of my relationships, not just with my wife, but with my parents, with my friends. And I went into like meditating and focusing on my personal healing just because I needed to save myself. I needed to figure out how to get over this anxiety, how to get over this sadness. But then pretty quickly, I saw that the patience I was developing with myself, I was able to then turn and, give more patience to my partner, give more, be better able to listen, and just this emotional skill set that I was building to take care of myself, I could transfer and also, use it to have more harmony in a relationship.
I realized that same thing, and actually vice versa too. When I met my husband, I was really deep in healing from an eating disorder, but it was a daily struggle. And I remember I was dating him for like 4 months, and I just remember sitting there eating, this sounds so silly, but I was sitting there eating a sandwich, and I just realized that I had none of the addictive feelings that I had always had around food, where it's like every meal was like, okay, let's be really mindful about this. I wasn't having that anymore. I was just eating in peace. And I remember like tears started rolling down my face. I wasn't telling him what was going on because I wanted to appear healed, but I was still very much in the journey. And I feel like that love was it was like the last key to my healing that I had been working on by myself for so long.
Oh, that's really powerful and beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And did that moment like change the dynamic between the two of you at all?
No, when I met him, I wasn't sharing yet about what I had been going through with that. Like I said, I really wanted to appear healed, and I had been on the journey for a long time. So it was very different from what it had been beforehand. Whereas, there was years where it was every day binging and purging every single day. And now I had gotten to a point of like, there might be months that went by where I wouldn't do it, but it was always on my mind. And so I was finally able to be in love instead of in addiction for a while. And so I shared it with him a little bit later. But And so I think it did change, but I don't think he would have noticed because it was more of an internal realization of like, oh, I can just be in this moment.
Yeah, yeah, that's really powerful.
You talk about this intense connection that you had with Sarah that hit some
Hmm.
rough patches. Tell me about the moment when you realized, oh shit, love isn't enough.
Oh man, I realized that like from the get. I think from the beginning, we were, obviously had the very typical beginnings of a relationship that are just like so heightened and exciting and feeling like you found the right person in like the ocean of humanity, which is, sometimes feels so hard to find. But pretty quickly there were also like arguments, blaming, not knowing how to like even hold an argument. But we were also granted very young. We were like, 18 and 19. So there was very little self-awareness for us as individuals, very little emotional maturity. And I think it was early on in those college days where it was like, oh, love doesn't automatically just solve everything. But that feeling kept going on for years where we wanted to be together and we kept coming back to each other, even moments when we would take breaks or break up. We would come back together after a few months and we just still didn't know how to pull ourselves out of the hurricane or even how to handle the miscommunication, how to properly forgive, how to stop blaming, how to, it just honestly felt like chaos for 6 years.
That is so interesting because I've thought about this a lot. I am not with my
Hmm.
college sweetheart. And
Hmm.
I'm always really amazed when people are because
Mm.
I got to have all the bad relationships, have all the horrible patterns, and be the toxic one at times, be the non toxic one at times. But then,
Yeah.
like, come back to myself, learn, and then start fresh with somebody. So I'm always so impressed by the people who can actually start in college when I didn't know anybody that had healthy routines and habits
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and then transform a relationship afterwards. So what was that like for you?
I've never been asked that, but that context is so interesting because it really, really feels like we grew up together. We are like we obviously love each other, but we're also best friends and we're such a deep aspect in each other's lives. But it feels like something like I'm so grateful. Like it feels like we won the lottery because I love standing next to her. I love the fact that her face is the sort of the main anchor of all of my memories for the past 17 years because I see her face more than I see my own. And it's like through this lens of like seeing her and then the rest of the world around her, like that's what my perception really is. But I think it was painful to not know how to hold our relationship well, or whenever we would feel down, not be able to give each other proper support. And I think we wanted to have harmony, but we just didn't know how to because this was also, we're talking, the years like 2007 to 2012. Well, this is like a very pre-wellness era. Like, therapy still getting more popular. Self-love isn't really part of the conversation. Self-awareness definitely is not part of the conversation. And meditating still felt very sort of like different and it wasn't part of our lives. Um, so I feel fortunate that we were able to like hold each other enough that we were able to get through that. And then once we did start meditating, it was like entering a whole new relationship. Things were definitely not immediately better. It was a very like gradual development where we started realizing that we were developing qualities that were making it a little bit easier to be kinder and more compassionate to each other. But when you multiply that over years of meditating together, the fights are just not as intense as they used to be. There's so much better communication and the love just feels bigger and it just everything is held with much more gratitude. But it feels interesting having multiple chapters with one person and feeling like the first chapter was like it feels like a lifetime ago.
I relate to that. Maybe because I still kind of acted like a college girl up until about age 30. And so I met my husband in that time frame, and now you look at it through a lens of just being young and free and living paycheck to paycheck and not having any responsibility, and then starting to really try to build our businesses alongside of each other, and then having kids, which is a whole different phase
Mm.
of each other, of our relationship, of just life in general. But you make this really interesting point in your book about the difference between attachment and love.
Mm.
What's the story that made that click for you?
I think it really clicked after I, went into my first three meditation courses, like the first three silent 10-day meditation courses, where a lot of what you do there, you're basically understanding how to do the opposite of having attachment, which is non-reaction and just embracing impermanence. And as I've been, the deeper I go into meditating, it's become so clear that embracing impermanence, like literally embracing the fact that change is real and is bound to happen, is in direct opposition to attachment. It's the direct opposite of attachment, because attachment just clings and wants everything to stay the same. And when you want to love a dynamic human being, which is what we all are, we are beings of change, and trying to just, essentially, if you come into a relationship with attachment, you're going to end up trying to control a person. You're not going to support them as they change. You're going to want them to fit this particular image in your mind. And that just squeezes the love out of a relationship. So I think, as opposed to trying to, set up a relationship around attachments and silent expectations, you're better off communicating and just developing commitments.
And so when you're communicating and developing commitments, what does that look like?
It looks like, very clearly lining out for your partner how you would like your happiness to be supported. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to agree to everything, because it's not going to be possible for a person to show up the same for you every single day. People exist in ups and downs. So the amount that they're able to show up for you is going to vary over time. But when you are lining out how you would like your happiness to be supported, which means essentially, talking about your needs or your wants, and then checking in with your partner, showing them what your needs and wants are, and them saying, oh, these are things that I would like to do for you. These are things that I can try to commit to in terms of how we want to shape the culture of our relationship. So being vocal about that and doubling down on communication, and also simultaneously understanding that the way I like to have my happiness supported and the way that you like to have your happiness supported, that's also going to change over time. So this is an ongoing discussion that will evolve.
I love how you said this is also going to change over time, acknowledging that. I just realized this long lasting frustration I've had with my mom. I've known this, but something silly happened the other day. It was Valentine's Day, and she was like, oh, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, Shane and I are going to go out to dinner. Like I said, what we did with the kids in the morning. I was like, and then we're going to go out to dinner. And she's like, I thought you didn't celebrate Valentine's Day. And I was just sitting there thinking, man, moms are so wild, because they'll hold you to something that you said like when you were like 21 and single,
Yeah.
and just like not celebrating Valentine's Day because you're protecting yourself from rejection. And then like sitting there like, I don't remember saying that. I mean, I guess I do remember a phase I went through. And then all of a sudden I'm like defensive, and I'm like, oh, we do now. Things have changed. And I like hung up, but I was dwelling on that for a minute. And I was like, that is the beautiful thing about a conscious relationship, because that's not something my husband would ever say to me. And I wouldn't even need to tell him, this has changed for me now. Like I can, and I will, and I do, but he's expecting that things are going to change for me. And he just holds space for that. And he's more approaching me with curiosity. Like, who are you going to be today? Especially if you're on a rapid transformation track.
Yeah, I love that. That line right there, like approaching someone with curiosity, like that feels like that's how you keep the love alive, because your partner flows with the universe, and our universe is one of dynamic change. It's constantly ever flowing, and we have to understand that at the atomic level, the biological level, the cosmological level, everything is constantly changing, and that includes us as human beings. And when we try to fight that change, life gets really hard. It hurts. So I think the simplest way to see that in your daily life is that your preferences are going to evolve over time. The TV shows that you watch, the books you like to read, the activities you like to do by yourself and with your partner, all of that's going to evolve, and that's okay. And it's actually a point of fun in your relationship and in your life.
I have to acknowledge that our generation has so much more understanding and language around
Mm,
these types of concepts. Whereas I know my mom was doing the best she can, and she doesn't spend the time understanding what is emerging in the cultures like I do. And it reminds me of something you talk about in your book about healing the healing generation thing. And it reminds me exactly of what just happened with my mom, where I'm expecting my mom to be at the level of evolution that maybe my partner and I are always there. And it's an expectation, but it's not an expectation. I'm expecting her not to be, but I'm still feeling frustrated. So I know there's some sort of internal expectation, But what differences do you see in how young people handle relationships now versus how
hmm.
parents did?
Yeah, that's such a I don't know, a key point of difference that I see with people who are in their like 40s and 30s and 20s. It feels like being miserable has gone out of style. It feels like it's just, you just don't need to sit in your sorrow forever. Like just because and then I think that's something that we've learned from um, a combination of like the mental health movement, self love, and also people taking their health into their own hands and being more proactive about you know, not just like solving physical ailments, but also mental ailments and trying to do things about them to alleviate the tension that they feel. And I think we live in this like pretty special time where we're supported by the fact that there are millions of people who are in therapy now. There are millions of people who are practicing different types of meditation. There are like millions of people who are just trying to pursue different tracks of self development and self awareness. And I just think like we live in these pretty like historically unprecedented times where we're doing something about the mental heaviness that we carry, where the past doesn't have to keep repeating itself. Like we can just, say no to our old patterns and make wiser decisions. And I think that's pretty special. So that's why I like to think of us as the healing generation, because I'm just like, I'm done with me being miserable. I want to open up a new chapter.
Part of me wonders what we'll learn in the next generation about how we've gone
Mm,
about it since we are the first ones. One of the things I think about sometimes, I read a study about how there's actually some emerging data that some kids are dwelling too much in the how I feel too young, and it's actually causing
mm.
their own misery because their parents are like, but tell me how you feel, instead of just like distracting them and moving them on with the next activity. And I do see it. When I lived in LA, I moved to a small mountain town in 2020. And at first I was really sad to lose all of the mindfulness and wellness. And I still go there for those things because I'm only a couple hours away. But when I got here, I couldn't help but realize, are people happier? And I don't know if
Mm,
they're actually happier, but I know that they're not thinking so much about how to fix everything that's wrong as some of my LA friends. And so I'm just interested to see what'll happen in 10, 20 years when we look back. Were we making ourselves happier? Because sometimes more self-awareness actually feels like it sets you back a little bit, because you're not just overriding and bypassing all the negative feelings,
mm.
but then sometimes you can get stuck there.
Yeah, I mean, self-awareness like is difficult without acceptance and like action, right? Like intentionally trying to cultivate new ways of being, because it's different if you're just like being aware of yourself and then using that as an opportunity to beat yourself up and just wallow in the tension and make the tension bigger and bigger. So that's why I think it's really valuable for people to, like find a tool that really works for you. It's one thing to try a little bit of everything, but I often encourage people that after they try a few different things, like find a modality that really is going to give you results, like something that you intuitively connect with and you are noticing change behavior, because that's ultimately where it's at, is like, is your behavior changing? Is there a new smoothness in your life in terms of like how you make better decisions and how you're showing up interpersonally? Because otherwise, then you're just like playing some type of mental game and it can get pretty tricky. And I think what you were saying too about the balance of it, right? Like that's what it points to me, is that we of course can err too far on the side of like too much self-development and too much like this sort of focus on the emotional world, where part of life and part of being happy is simply being in nature, being in community, like, being able to feel like we're a part of something. And like these are fundamental aspects that play a role in our inner peace. And so do, self acceptance, self awareness, non reactiveness, compassion. So having a balance between the internal and the external dynamics are also really important. But I'm excited for, what the next generation will teach us as well. So we definitely don't have it all figured out.
And we never will. But I love what you said about the actually going deep and finding a modality that you can commit to for a while, even to see if it's the one that works for you.
Yeah.
For a long time, I was a self-development junkie, and I still can be, or I'm like reading 19 books at a time and I just read them as fast as I can and then move on to the next one. And something changed for me when I actually decided, okay, yes, and knowledge worked for a while, but now there's a plateau. I need to actually sit here and do the work that it's telling me to do.
Yeah.
You can binge this podcast all you want, and I love you for that. But that's why I give action items at the end. Like, what are you going to do this week to bring it into your reality? But one of my two tools, meditation is one of them. When I finally committed to that, it took me about 10 years to really get into the groove of it being a daily thing and it being mine. But then the other one, and you mentioned this in your book too, is relationships. It is so easy to sit there and work on myself in my studio apartment. But when I have a husband and then kids, and they reflect back to you your blind spots, and you can't be this perfectly curated version of yourself all the time anymore because somebody.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for you, what is something that a relationship taught you about yourself that blindsided you?
Yeah, I think a ton of things. Like it's one thing to like sit alone in a meditation retreat and it's extremely productive, but you do a good job in there to do a good job out here. And you also do a good job out here to do a good job in there. So these things are like very intrinsically connected. But I think immediately, like as soon as I started developing self-awareness, I realized I don't listen well. Like I need to improve my ability to listen. My patience is not that good. Like I need to improve my patience. My ability to see perspectives outside of my own also needs to be strengthened. And I can just keep going on and on, right? But like it was so clear where I was, honestly just stunted and needed development, needed attention and effort. But then I also did see that at the very least, I had the energy and the strength to put my foot down and be like, okay, I see this. Now let me work on it. Let me try to do my best. And I honestly think I was really energized by meditating. I think it took me a long time too to bring it into daily life. I did like a number of 10-day courses before I started meditating. I think I did like 5 10-day courses, and before I started bringing that into daily life. And it was after I brought it into daily life where the progress was like just way faster, because when I'm in the tradition that I'm a part of, the Vipassana tradition, like you're basically developing 3 qualities. Like when you meditate, you're taking yourself to the mental gym and you're developing these qualities of awareness, non-reaction, and compassion. And like every human being has these qualities, but are they developed? So you're really just taking yourself to the mental gym, strengthening those qualities. And I saw how, you can see where you're lacking, but with time and like gradual effort, you can improve for sure.
relationships can be mirrors, whether they're there or not. And I say that because I feel like when I look back on my life, I spent a lot of time craving a relationship, wanting to be in a relationship so badly. And then there was a period of time where, because I was so desperate for it, that I didn't have a lot of boundaries. And so I wanted to be what I thought they wanted me to be. And then it was exhausting. And then I couldn't keep it up. And then there was a lot of like self-protection because I couldn't keep up the facade the whole time. Or then I'd just get fed up and be like, well, you don't care about the stuff I like. It's because I've never told them. And so one of the things that you talk about is loneliness. How do you know if you're actually ready for a relationship versus just in that desperation of loneliness?
Wow, that's a good question. I think it's interesting because you can even be lonely in a relationship. I think it's like the loneliness will appear whenever there's a feeling of separation between you and yourself. And if there's any type of separation between you and yourself, then it will also be even more deeply magnified between you and other people. So I think whether you're in a relationship or not, loneliness, has the potential to be there. And the way to close that is through self-acceptance and really being able to cultivate that ability to honestly just be your own friend, to like be your own friend and to not postpone your happiness. Cause I think that's what happens a lot of times with people who are looking for the right partner and they're putting a lot of effort into it, but they're unconsciously postponing their happiness for when they are with this individual. But you have to realize the other aspect of that too is like, whether you're with someone or not, ultimately your happiness is dependent on your perception and the way you're reacting to life. Because you can easily be in a relationship with someone who wants to support your happiness, who wants to be there for you. But if you have these, emotional blocks or old pain that you're carrying back, from the past over and over again into the present, then it'll be hard to receive their love well. But I think for a lot of individuals, like my advice to people is like, don't wait until you're like perfectly healed or like perfectly like not lonely anymore. Because sometimes you find, and like for the vast majority of us, like we will arrive into relationships with past pain. We'll arrive into relationships with stuff that we still need to work on that's still pretty big. But you can still have a healthy relationship and develop systems where you can care for each other relatively well while you're still figuring your stuff out and trying your best to show up as a good partner.
That's such a good point with everything. A lot of people postpone their happiness for anything. It's like we're working towards building a business. Oh, I'll do this when I reach this goal. Oh, I'll do this when I can quit my job. I'll do this. And if you're constantly living your life like that, even when you get those things, your natural instinct is going to be to postpone it for the next thing because you're in that cycle. You're future focused. And you have to come back to the present moment and say, like, yes, there might be limitations. It might be, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do trips with my partner until I actually have a partner. And that's like one of the things I feel like is going to make me happy. But what can I do now? Can I go on a solo trip? Can I find a friend to go on this? Like whatever it is, that just as an example, but how are you going to build in that level of happiness now? Because the truth is a happy partner isn't going to be attracted to an unhappy person waiting for somebody to complete them. They're going to want to find somebody who's also happy on their own so that they can come and live a non-codependent life.
Yeah, no, it's really true. And it's funny how like the happiness of another can just like multiply your happiness when you are in steady grounds within yourself. And I definitely found that like with my wife, where as we started cultivating ourselves, as we started really growing as individuals, because like we did not go into meditating to fix a relationship. We both went into it because we were just tired, like tired of the way our minds worked as separate individuals. And we wanted to explore something new. And as it came out, like, when we would come out of these courses, it felt like we were new people. It was like, my mind did not feel as heavy as before. And that would immediately turn to having more compassion for others when I would hear their stories. And I think my wife was experiencing something similar. So it was honestly a shock for the both of us that like there's a deep bridge between personal growth and harmony in relationships.
I speak to a lot of people who are the ones leading the relationship and might not even be leading. There's a lot of people out there that are on this personal growth journey and their partner is not.
Mm. Hmm.
You had a relationship and I have a relationship where we're pretty much in it together. I tend to go a lot deeper into everything, but he's like, okay, what are we doing next? And he'll come with me. What do you recommend to get a partner on board or to have acceptance if they're just not in it?
Yeah, I think the primary thing that inspires other people is seeing the change that's happening within you. So you can like tell them you got to go to this thing, you got to try this thing. That's not going to work as well as them seeing you make different choices, seeing you be calmer, seeing you be happier. They're going to be like, "Hey, what's up? What's going on with you? If you did something to help yourself, I want to do that for myself too." The other end of that is that we have to understand as individuals that the conditioning of our minds creates a very unique shape. So the conditioning that I have is very different from the conditioning that my wife has. Same thing between you and your partner. And you'll find that people just don't grow at the same speeds, right? And what they're growing and working on can be wildly different. And oftentimes the same tools, like the tools that work well for you, won't work well for another person. And like, for example, like I really like meditating, but I have family members who are benefiting greatly from therapy, others that are benefiting greatly from psychiatry, others that just use their own self-awareness to help them, figure out what they need to work on next. And I think that it takes a degree of like really, being grounded in yourself to be able to accept the fact that it's okay that you and your partner are not doing the same exact thing and that you can still be moving in a similar direction if you're not practicing the same modality. I think it's quite challenging, but I've seen it work. I've seen couples that, one meditates, one uses therapy, or one meditates a lot and the other one's just not interested. And it works fine. As long as there's a certain degree of openness to growth, then I think you can find a way to get along and keep growing together.
I think the openness to growth is key there. Like I
Yeah.
said, I meditate 20 minutes a day. My husband will do 5 minutes here and there, sometimes 10 when he feels like he needs it. But he has his own outlets. He loves to snowboard, and for him that chairlift ride and coming down is the meditation. But
Cool.
it's the openness to growth of like, here's what I'm learning, and him being curious about that. Whereas I've had relationships in the past and I feel like they're quite common, or maybe it was just the age I was in dating at that time. But it's like, the relationship with the partner is just resistant. Like you're not going to try to get me to do this, or kind of doing those little jabs to cut it down a little bit so that you don't get them in there. That's where it gets really difficult, because then you're in this state of like, okay, well, is this what I want? And I think that's one of the shifts that's happened in relationships between generations, whereas a lot of our parents, or maybe the generation before that, would just stay in a loveless marriage. Whereas now we're like, no, I want to choose something different. But it's another one of those topics where it's like, did we swing too far? Did we
Yeah.
lose the sanctity of marriage and the effort to commit?
Yeah. I think of course, it's like a very, case by case situation, but I think it's hard. But even what you were pointing towards really opens up a clear point of relationships where a relationship is healthy or not is if your partner is supporting your freedom. And like if they're disinterested in what you're doing for themselves but still supportive of you, like go for it. Go check it out, go do your meditation thing, go do your art thing, whatever it is that you want. Because they're like comfortable with the commitments of your relationship. Because oftentimes when people hear the word freedom in a relationship, they think, oh, you're free to cheat, you're free to do X, Y, and Z and do whatever you want. Like it's not lawlessness. Freedom in a relationship just means that I do not want to in any way control the way that you evolve and change and the way your interests may evolve over time, the way you're, what hobbies you want to have, what self-development tool you want. It's like, because sometimes we want to almost try to be twins with our partner when really it's better for us to just be individuals who choose to design a life together.
I agree with that completely. I'm grateful sometimes for our differences because it's the balance
Yeah.
that I need. It's the yin and the yang on the other side. But when you were talking, I'm reminded of we talked earlier about the difference between attachment and love. But sometimes it's hard to read that label when you're inside the bottle. What are some of the signs that the relationship might be based more on attachment than love?
Mm. I think one of the clearest signs where a relationship is struggling is that it's really common for relationships to have ups and downs, and it's absolutely normal. But if your relationship is going from one down moment to another down moment to another down moment, then that's a sign of not only that something is not right with the relationship, but it's also a sign of rigidity. Like it's something about the relationship is too rigid, where like there's too, because the attachments in your mind will manifest as control in external life, where you'll be trying to demand a very certain situation to occur or demand your partner to be in a particular way. And attachment is the opposite of, being able to flow, being able to move a little more loosely through life and move with the ups and downs, as opposed to trying to stop the downs from happening. But I think part of that is like that rigidity of attachment just makes for more arguments. It makes for, more of these like difficult moments and challenging times where both people are really unhappy. And you have to really question yourself. Like if you're just going from, a down moment every now and then is totally natural. But if it's a constant down moment, then something's not right.
And then you wonder, is this a roller coaster because it actually has to be because of external circumstances, or am I just addicted to the roller coaster and now it feels too calm, so I'm going to pick a fight? Been there. Been there in my 20s. There's one relationship. I was just thinking about it yesterday because it was immediately following my most toxic relationship ever. And then this guy was just healthy and kind, and we weren't a match, but he wasn't like my past relationships, and I wasn't used to that. And so I couldn't feel safe in the relationship because I didn't feel safe in relationship in general.
Yeah. What did you have to do for like, how did you, because I've written about this too. And to me, it's such an interesting topic where there are times where you have to put up boundaries to be able to protect yourself from someone who, it could be a toxic relationship or whatever it is. But if you're not careful, those boundaries can become walls and you're just kind of like stuck in this defensive pattern. But how did you allow yourself to relax in future relationships so that you can, really connect?
That first relationship was awful. And when I mean awful, I mean he ended up spending 11 years in jail and I got a felony for a crime I didn't commit. So it was really bad. And then I was out into a different relationship, and I wasn't sharing a lot of my inner world. And it was because I wasn't really connected to it. Honestly, I was bypassing in all the ways, just partying, doing whatever I could. And so in that relationship, I picked a lot of fights because I was used to having my heart broken and then being begged for forgiveness. And so love for me felt like that begging for forgiveness. And so if it was just all calm and I wasn't getting that kind of attention, it felt like something was wrong. And so that relationship was ruined. I think, and I would actually blame myself for the end of that relationship, even though, like I said, we weren't compatible. But after that, I did a lot of work on myself, and I was kind of doing it simultaneously. But once that relationship ended, I could just be in my growth. And I spent several years single. So by the time I got into my next relationship, I was in such a different place. I was, like I said, healing my eating disorder. I'd been doing yoga for years at this point. I had read tons of books. And so my husband was the next real relationship, and we bonded over We both were reading The Power by Rhonda Byrne, everyone's intro to spirituality. I feel like The Secret or whatever. And so
Mm,
we were connected on a new wavelength, and we were both still very much at the beginning of that, but it was the sign that we were going to grow together. I had never had somebody in relationship with me, or even really a friend that was interested in what I was reading along the self-development. The self-help was always the weird thing, or
yeah, yeah.
that it's cheesy, whatever. And so um, I had a lot more trust in that because I knew at our heart, in our hearts, we were friends first. And so it
Wow.
was just a whole different energy. But I think I needed to be alone, because if I would have jumped into a relationship after that one, I wouldn't have had enough time to unravel my own patterns.
And then there's the potential for like greater repetition as opposed to like the power of solitude where you can like really see yourself. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's like that's really, yeah, it's really powerful to hear that.
How do you know the difference between the relationship that will help us grow versus keep us stuck? Because I think a lot of people have trouble identifying that from the get-go, and then they're too deep in and they're like 3 years in and they realize their partner's just has no
Mm.
interest.
Yeah, that I think one of the hardest things I see sometimes are when partners support each other in their ignorance, where like, let's say like someone does something that's clearly wrong in public, and then the other person is just like loyal to a fault, like loyal to like a sinking ship. And I think that time, seeing things like that, it's hard because like that's going to keep you stuck. Like I think part of the relationship is like that I can feel so safe and vulnerable with you that not only do I feel appreciated, but I also feel comfortable hearing the truth from you. And I think some of the biggest insights that I've gained about myself have come by way of my wife. Like she helps me celebrate victories, but she also lets me know in a very gentle manner when I could do things a little bit better. And I think that's what keeps the evolution of, I'm seeing my potentials for growth, but she also supports me in telling me the truth.
I never identified with not knowing how to be vulnerable until I started seeing it
Mm,
anyway. And it's because I've always been sort of an open book. I've had a habit in the past of saying things for the shock factor. And to me, that was
mm,
easier than hiding things. So I just wouldn't hide anything. I would like spill all my dirty laundry out in like the most abnormal way, like over drinks at a party. And I realized later on that that's not being vulnerable. That's actually another
mm.
form of protection, because it pushes people away. It shocks them, and
Interesting.
it creates a wall. And that was my form of protection. And so I didn't really realize until I was in a relationship that I felt really safe the first time with my husband, that what vulnerability actually felt like. And I think what made it a lot easier to be vulnerable with that relationship is that, and it wasn't in the beginning that we did this. It took some lessons and some fights before we got to this place, but something really shifted when we started allowing each other grace for our mess ups. Whereas
Mm,
before, even when somebody would come to the middle, it's like, okay, yeah, you're sorry, but like, why did you do that? Like really drilling in, like, but what was going through your mind? Rather than just understanding we're all human, we get caught up in our emotions, and we just might say stuff that isn't how we really feel, isn't what we want to convey, And so instead of like digging into the why and like getting around to make sure it never happened, just being like, okay, you know what? I'm going to let that go, because I'm probably going to say something that's offensive at some point, and then you're going to let that go. You know what I mean?
I relate so much to what you're saying. My wife and I were literally just talking about this yesterday, where we were sort of just taking a look at the way so much has changed. And there are still moments where, non-reaction is totally imperfect and we slip into like some type of like, quiet reaction. And often that'll look like being a little snarky to each other, right? Or like saying, I don't know, just like saying something that's not as kind, or with like, with a little bit of you can feel the tension in the words. And what's happened now is that like one, we forgive each other like super fast. It's not like it's like whatever. We don't even really need to talk about it because it's so light. Because what happens is that we have developed our awareness enough where like I can feel when I'm saying something snarky and it'll come out. And then I'm like, shoot, I'm like, you know, I apologize. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, my bad. Like, I'm just, I'm stressed from work or I'm stressed from X, Y, and Z. And being able to communicate that and just let it go. And it feels like, that, like, certainly there are times where you should apologize and, your partner should hold you accountable. But it's also simultaneously really powerful to just be able to let go of the little petty stuff, like let go of the little things because we are highly imperfect beings and we're bound to make mistakes.
And it feels so good. And not even just when it gets done to you, when you actually do it, when you realize,
Hmm.
oh, I can just let that pass. Just like the thought that I wanted to hold on to during a meditation, I can just let it flow by.
Yep.
If I feel like it needs to be addressed because I really can't get over it, then we can sit down later when we're not in our feels and we can say something like, I just want to talk about this. One thing that's been helpful, at least in the language framing with checking in with my
Mm,
partner, is saying something like there's been times where I feel like I'm really caught in the emotion. Like I can't let it go and I can't find my higher self with it. And it's
yeah.
been really nice having somebody that I can say, listen, I'm really mad about this. And I also have a part of my mind that identifies that it's unfair for like a lot of reasons and that you didn't mean it, but I'm having a hard time. Can you help me with this? And then coming out
Wow.
with that language is so much better because I'm identifying that like it's not fair, but like I'm attached to this emotion and can you help me move through it? And there's been times that hasn't worked because I've done it at the wrong time. And then there's been
Hmm.
times that it's worked so beautifully and we get to this new level of communication and understanding of one another.
I think that's so cool because it points to the fact that when you're expanding your self-awareness, you're also allowing for the holding of increasing complexity of a situation where it's like, I'm feeling these two things at once. Like, and I'm also aware of these two things at once. And something that I find like that happens often between my wife and I is that we do a lot of problem solving together, right? Where either when it comes to work things, because we run a small business together with all the young Pueblo stuff, like we're the ones, like I do the writing, but she does the managing. And there's just so much that we do together. But then on the other end of that is like, even though we're developing harmony between the two of us as a couple, like life is still really difficult. Things happen to family members. Family members get sick. Family members pass away. Like there's always difficult moments that are happening all the time. So there are times where we have to have these discussions and make decisions and we've stopped forcing decisions to always happen. And sometimes we're allowing ourselves where it's like, hey, babe, like I'm not trying to like change anything, but I just want to talk about this a little more. Like I just want to tell you how I feel about this, but I'm not like angling anything or trying to make anything happen. And I'm not even looking for a resolution. Like even if we're going to make some type of decision and we're still firm on that, but I just want to talk about the other side of things and being able to just have those moments where we can really express ourselves without anyone feeling attacked. It's so sweet and so like just takes the load off.
I'm going to use that. I actually immediately thought of multiple situations because you're right. Stuff is coming up all the time. Just
It's
saying,
constant. It's constant problem solving. It's
do you
like
think
really
we're gonna like things are gonna settle down? I was just saying,
no.
like, last September was so crazy. I thought I'd get like a year of peace, but no, like even this last month, I was like, why is this so wild? Like our kids had a stomach bug for 3 full weeks where we were
Oh
changing
my
the
God.
sheets like 3 times a night per child for 3 weeks. We were almost
Oh
losing our
God.
mind. And then somebody died at that same time. So one of us had to fly away. I had a speaking engagement. It was just like chaos. But I found that sometimes when there's chaos in our plans and just a lot of stuff going on, like there always is, if it's his stuff, it's easy for me to want to be passive aggressive and all of a sudden be stressed. And it's like, well, we got all this stuff going on, like vice
Yeah,
versa.
yeah.
And so I love that idea of like, because it feels like something needs to come out and sometimes I can't stop it. And I'm like, I don't have a therapist, so I need to talk to you. And so being able to say like, okay, I'm not trying to change anything, but can we just talk about this? Because you might even come to some sort of conclusion to make the load easier if you're coming together and connecting from the heart rather than just getting stuck in your head with your emotions.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the like it almost like releases a pressure valve too, because there are moments where you have decisions that you know are the right decision to make as a couple when trying to solve an issue that's like a more external issue outside of your relationship, and there's no way around it. And it's a hard decision to make, but it has to be made. But then there's still like a lot of emotions around it, and it can look like a difficult like work decision or a difficult family decision, but you're like, it has to be made. But then we can still talk about it even though we know we're still moving in this particular direction. And honestly, it's been nice because it just like allows more, I don't know, just more time for like exactly what you said, where our emotions are not bound up and held privately in our minds, and we can just see each other's tension and be like, oh, we're okay.
Because there just is truth about getting something out of your head. Whether you are writing it down, whether you are even just speaking it out loud to yourself. I use voice recorders a lot, and I'm really loving the new AI voice recorders because then I can just like take the transcript and like, what themes are you seeing from my brain dump right now? And I'll just like go outside and I talk to it like a human. I'm like, okay, this is what's going on. I have one thread in ChatGPT where it's already programmed with the lens that I want it to view it from. I actually have to read this to you because I think you'll like it.
I want to hear.
So, and I've been sending this to people. So I have one chat project that just automatically has this in it. This prompt. If reality or there's too much symbolic precision in the world for it to be random. The more I look, the more I see evidence that reality isn't what we think. It's not linear, but a meta-scripted, auto-executing projection built on symbols, numerology, and coded patterns. Given that framework, I want to understand my current situation through this lens. And then I'll just start talking and I'm like, okay, so this is going on. I'm feeling kind of mad about this. I know it's not fair because of this, but I can't help it. And then he said this to me yesterday. What do you see here? And it gives me this super deep, like symbolically coded, everything is one, the law of one. I've just been like putting my worldview in, and it's better than a therapist, honestly, because it's immediate and not biased.
you might have to be careful because you might end up like accidentally creating a new type of like human design or like astrology or like a new form of like seeing how. Because I love how there are just so many different types of traditions that can help human beings see themselves more clearly. But I bet even with like the power of AI, there's like so much that we're not seeing.
When we think about this idea that you brought up earlier, freedom in love, you mentioned that your definition of freedom has changed over the years, but how do you make sure that that is the basis of your relationship?
There's one, I mean, it's not one, but there's a moment that happens repeatedly in our relationship where this is where I know we're supporting each other's freedom. Sarah and I will go away to longer meditation courses where we're meditating for 30 days or 45 days, totally silent. We're not together. We're, in separate rooms. We don't see each other for the entirety of the course. And in that time, you're spending so much time meditating where you're literally just deleting old conditioning. Like old conditioning, we're talking like, all the memories are still there, but the tension wrapped around the memories, the habit patterns that were impulsive, all this stuff just decreases and weakens over time. And it creates so much space for you to be a new, more compassionate version of yourself. When we finish these courses, I have to learn who I am now again because so much has been deleted. Like, and I mean, like, I'm well aware, my name's Diego and I do X, Y, and Z, but I have to like relearn, what are my interests now? Like, what do I want to do with my time? How, what even something simple as like, what TV shows do I like to watch now versus before? and even what music I like. There are so many times where I'll turn on a playlist that I listen to before the 45-day course after, and I'm like, whoa, this music is not right for me at all. And my wife is going through the same experience where we're getting to know ourselves as individuals as we're getting to learn who the new version of who we are again. And we've had this experience a few times now, and it's so much fun because our preferences do change quite drastically. Like we're not really the same after. And it's really nice getting to know who she is. And the commitment to each other is clearly still there. And there's so much, even more love than before. But it's like we're new people. And because I'm not trying to make her the version that she was before, and I'm just actually out of curiosity being like, what are you into now? That's freedom. It's like I have no control over her preferences, but I'm super curious about them.
I love that because it's just a reminder that we connect at the soul level. Like that's what happens when in my mind when I'm realizing like, I'm like wanting him to do this, or it's that controlling mechanism that I feel.
Mhm.
A lot of the times if I just take a deep breath and like loosen my body a little bit and tune into my heart, it's like I can feel it opening, and all
Mm,
of that I was just focused on just melts away. Something about it's always like on the surface. It's like in the tension, but it's never deep within the heart. And if I can
mm.
just like bring attention there, bring awareness there, a lot of times the problem dissolves itself and I don't need to get so logical about it.
Yeah, I mean, I find the same thing too, where like when I come back to the body and I can feel my body again, it's immediately grounding and I'm reconnected with the present moment. I'm reconnected with a sense of mental balance, and then I can like move forward. But if I'm like really disconnected from my body, then like I'm gonna automatically be impulsive.
One thing I'm inspired by is your emotional check-ins that you talk about with
Mm.
your wife. Where did that idea come from? How has it changed your relationship and what does that look like?
Honestly, it came from the the very tense incubator of the pandemic. Um, when we had already been meditating for a few years before the pandemic started, and we once we were sort of trapped in our one bedroom apartment in New York City, we saw that there was a lack of communication between the two of us that was causing a lot of unnecessary arguments. And over time, we started seeing ever more clearly how whenever the mind would feel tension, it did not want to accept responsibility. What my mind and what her mind wanted to initially do was just place blame. Like, how can I make this tension I feel in my mind your fault? And we found that the way to counteract that, to stop those sort of illogical narratives from forming, was to just be honest about how we felt a few times a day. And that would start with, waking up in the morning, and we wake up, we say good morning, and then it's like we just automatically tell each other how we feel. And it's unprompted. It's very in a relaxed manner. And it's, it can be something like, I'm feeling tired today, or I feel great today, or I feel a lot of heaviness moving through me, or, my mind feels scattered, just whatever it is that's you're prominently feeling. And it's so helpful because then I know how I'm feeling and she knows how I'm feeling and vice versa. And that way we have the information we need to support each other better. And it's been just like one of the best things that we've done to honestly just decrease all these unnecessary arguments.
I feel like that is something that might even be able to work in the moment. Oh, we'll see. I'll play with it. But a lot of the tools in communication and relationships, like a lot of them I feel like are like better, like, okay, go get out of your feels, sit down
Hmm.
and then connect in a new way. But I feel like well, as you were talking, I can almost imagine being heated or having some tension and just being like, what are you feeling right now? Like, get the feelings out of the way first. Because so
Yeah.
often when we're coming together in an argument or a power struggle, I should call it instead, we're coming at it with the stories that we're telling ourselves about the situation rather than what's actually in the situation. And what's in the situation is two people who love each other that are both feeling a certain way that feels like tension. You know what I mean? So getting that feeling out of the way, or even feeling like somebody cares, like being frustrated and saying like, how are you feeling right now? Because I'm feeling super frustrated. Like, get that out of the way and then go through it. And it's like, maybe that'll just get to another level, or maybe it'll make everything worse. Well, I'll check in later with you.
Yeah, I think you're onto something though. That sounds really useful. I might try that too, because in the midst of it, being aware of like, just like both of us taking time to feel how we feel is just, it might help regain balance.
Yeah, because there's some amount of compassion about it. Like it gets you out of your head for a moment to get you back into your bodies. But thank you so much for spending an hour with me today. I love leaving listeners with something to ground this into the reality, whether it's something to think about or something to do, a little piece of mind love. What would you leave them with today?
I think it's really valuable, and just as valuable as having a gratitude practice. It's really spending time reflecting on the fact that everything is bound to change. The hard moments will change, the good moments will change. So don't have a combative relationship with change, because change is actually quite supportive. And try to allow the fact that change is bound to happen to support your inspiration to be ever more present with the good moments. So like with the people that you love, family members, your parents, maybe whoever it is, because they're not always going to be there. And the moments that you have with them they're a miracle. It's a miracle that you even have that opportunity to be in contact with these people. So cherish them. Don't be attached to them, but enjoy them.
Well, for listeners that are loving this conversation as much as I am, where can they find your book, How to Love Better, and connect with you online?
How to Love Better, you can order it online on Amazon. You can also find it in bookstores. And you can, local bookstores, Barnes and Nobles, wherever it is. You can also come hang out with me on Instagram at Young Pueblo, YUNG_PUEBLO, and also on Substack.
All the links from this episode will be at mindlove.com/391. Conversations like these are pure magic, where just ideas flow naturally and insights emerge effortlessly. But here's something I've learned after hosting hundreds of episodes, actually nearing 500 right now. What feels like natural chemistry is usually a craft that's been carefully honed. I've noticed this especially in the last few months as I've been expanding my guest roster. What I keep seeing is that the most powerful moments, the ones that really create transformation, come from people who've learned how to take their personal journey and shape it into something that serves others. Think about it. How many of us have gone through something really profound, something that completely changed our perspective or transformed our lives, and we felt that pull to share it with others? Maybe you've overcome anxiety, or healed a relationship, or discovered a way of living that finally feels authentic. And you know that deep down, your experience could help others who are going through the same thing. But here's what I've learned after interviewing a whole lot of these people. Having a powerful story isn't enough. The entrepreneurs and thought leaders who really make an impact, they've mastered the art of sharing their journey in a way that not only connects with others, but moves them to action. They know how to take their own transformation and turn it into something that creates transformation for others, whether that's through a business, a platform, or a movement. And I know that a lot of you out there listening have your own story, and you have the potential to be one of those people that makes an impact. So I have something special and free for you. After spending almost 2 decades helping entrepreneurs, nonprofits, startups, change makers craft compelling narratives. Also, if you haven't noticed, of these 500 episodes, every intro follows a framework. Every intro brings you into a story. I have developed a framework that makes storytelling accessible to everyone who wants to make a bigger impact. So I've put together a free guide called Unlock Your Story Magic that shows you how to turn your transformational experiences into captivating stories that connect and inspire and move people to action. So whether you're launching a business, building a platform, creating content that changes lives, this framework will help you make your message unforgettable. So you can get this free guide at mindlove.com/story. That's mindlove.com/story. And once you grab your guide, you'll also get details about an exclusive storytelling bootcamp that I'm hosting soon. So stay tuned for that page that says your free guide is on the way. You can find all of my incredible sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And if you want to chat about the guide, hit me up at mindlovemelissa on Instagram. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.